Hello, I'm Andrew, and this is how I use ParaText. Now, before we get started, I'm going to talk about some programs that you'll need to download in order to follow along with this tutorial and apply some of the different tips that I've got. So, to begin with, there's this software called Express Scribe transcription software, and this is free, and I'll put a link in the description. You can download this very small file and install that. And we'll get into why later. You'll see how it works. And then second thing is deepl.com. And here's a big link here, download for Windows. It's free. I don't recommend DeepL Pro. I've tried it. It didn't really help or make anything that much better. It does allow you to translate whole documents with the Pro, but Google Translate does that for free, and I think it does a better job. And then the other programs that I have open while I'm running ParaText are Logos, and finally I have BibleWorks. So I keep those handy. And so let's get into the first important thing that I use, and that's shortcut keys. So shortcut keys are super important. I think that it's something a lot of people neglect, and in ParaText it'll save you a lot of time if you learn things like Control-Shift-S for send and receive, and Control-Shift-N for adding notes to a project. And so yeah, I'd recommend that you get on board with shortcut keys as much as possible and learn them from the menus. Control-Shift-B, for example, brings up the biblical terms, key biblical terms tool, and there's more. So with that out of the way, let's talk about my layout. Here I've got a tab with the HBK English resource, the UBS guidebooks for translation. And then I've got another tab. It's called NAC. We'll talk more about that later. This is a project that I created, so it's just notes by Andrew Case. Then I've got the notes window. So this is the notes for the back translation of the Chatino project that I'm working on here. So I can see all the notes and work through those if I'm replying to things that they've already responded to and looking at their decisions. Now down here I've got the Hebrew, then I've got a tab with the translation, the actual translation of the Chatino text. Right here we're in Exodus right now, so it's empty. And then I've got a tab with the abridged Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Now the reason I have this here is because if I'm in the Hebrew and I right click this and I bring up a word here, if I don't have this tab open, then it's going to open a little tab, like a tiny little window, and it's going to be very awkward to read. And so I would rather have it open in a whole tab so I can see the better sized lexical entry. Okay, so over here we've got a text collection. I've got Reina Valera, NIV in Spanish, Dios habla hoy, and then I have ESV. So those are my go-to 4 versions that I typically run in a text collection. Then just for looking at formatting, because they're basing their formatting off of Dios habla hoy, I keep this open as a reference to see what kind of formatting, because you can't see the formatting of paragraphs and poetry lines and that kind of thing in the text collection. And then finally down here I have the back translation that I'm looking at. Now let's talk about this NAC project that I mentioned. This is a notes project. It's basically a standard, as you can see, a standard translation project, but I'm using it for notes. And these are notes in Spanish that will be applicable and useful for anyone, any translation team that understands Spanish and is working on whatever book these notes apply to. So the cool thing is that the versification is already there, and it's all synced. It will sync to whatever project somebody's working with, and it will also be shareable through send and receive. So I can add people as observers to the project to get access to it. And that way, it serves two purposes. Number one, I'm developing as I go, developing more and more notes that are valuable in Spanish, especially on harder passages. And so those can not only serve to help other consultants in the future and other teams, but they can also serve to prepare teams who are about to start out on a new book. So they can look at these notes as kind of like training ground for some of the more difficult or salient passages that they'll need to deal with before they start the whole process of translating. Some of the passages where harder key terms occur. So how do I use this? So I created it so that it's coordinated and it's going to be synced through the cloud. So I could have done this in a Word document, but then it's harder for me to share it with people, and then it's harder for people to be switching between windows. If I share it with the translation team that I'm working with, then it's harder for them to have access to it easily and have it all coordinated. I also like it better than just creating a consultant notes project, because just like this resource, everything is right here. I don't have to click on anything. The commentary is right there. I just have to scroll, and it's all synchronized to where I am in the verse. Before we get further into this, I need to mention my settings here. ParaText settings, I've got scroll scripture with any compatible applications. So that's how I run this, so that Logos will be scrolling with where I am in ParaText. So if I need to dip in to see another commentary on the passage that I'm looking at, it will already be there. Now this follows the same thing that ParaText does. You know, you have these text sets or window labels. So for instance here, this window, we can see that this is the scroll group A, and so you just need to go to Logos and set whatever commentary as your scroll group A, and you can do that here in this window, link set. Now if you're like me and for some reason you've done all those settings and you still can't get Logos to scroll with ParaText, there's actually a solution for that, and it worked for me, but it's very hard to find. So I'm going to link it in the description. This happens to be on lingtran.net, and there's this troubleshooting section that solved my problem very easily and is very useful. So I'll link that down below. So getting back to this, basically I am able to recreate this kind of resource in Spanish. So let's give an example. We're in Exodus 3:20, and so for those of you who don't know Spanish, so I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. And so obviously this Hebrew idiom is going to be tough for some people. So we can go here, and lo and behold, UBS nails it. They have a great little note here. So I'm gonna highlight this, and let's see how far we go down here. Yeah, there's all these. Let's go down to here for now. All right. So since I have DeepL installed, for me to translate this, or at least do a draft translation of this, all I have to do is Control-CC. Control-CC. So hold down Control and hit C twice. So normally once would be to copy, right? But you hit it twice, and then since this is running in the background, it automatically pops up. It populates what you copied into this and outputs it in Spanish. A beautiful translation in Spanish, and you have these options here. So all I have to do now is either clean it up here, or I can hit copy. So what I want to do is I want to clean this up. So I don't want this stuff in here. So I'm going to delete this. They don't need to know about these versions. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything to them. And then, okay, that's a little cleaner. I can copy this, go to my translation here, NAC, and now I've got this. All right. Now, it doesn't look as pretty as the HBK, right? Because this has got this nice bold formatting, which actually isn't available normally in ParaText as a normal tag. Well, what I did was I took the custom style file that goes with this, and I just put it in as a custom.sty for this project. So how did I do that? I'll try to link a copy of this style sheet into the description so you can download it, and then you can go to your C drive, My ParaText 9 projects, and then the folder of the project that you've created, if you've created one like mine, and then you just drag in custom.sty, and you'll have access to all of the fancy formatting that they have. So how do you do this? So let's say extenderé mi mano. All right, we want to bold that just like that. It's really easy, actually. You just select it, and then you just hit the / okay, and then it's SCR and space, and boom, you've got all that in bold now. Of course, you could go here to the standard view and see all of this formatting if you want to review what that looks like, right? But for me, I've got that memorized so far, so I'll leave that formatted. So the translators who are looking at this, they'll see the nice formatted view, and you can even use italics just as easily. So let's say you want to highlight this sentence, for example, and you want to make it in italics. Well, it's really easy. All you have to do is do the / and hit IT and type in IT in the spacebar, and there you go. So really nice options for formatting your little commentary there. So you could go through this, look at it, see how it goes, see how it is, if it's good Spanish, all that. I'm not going to do that right now. Generally, DeepL nails it, and there's very little cleanup that you have to do. And the only thing that is difficult sometimes is they're often, like here, we got golpear significa golpear, it doesn't have as many synonyms as it might have in English, and so you end up having something redundant. So you just take that out or whatever. And so you can tweak this. So my Hebrew professor taught me never do good work twice. If you're going to do good work, make sure you write it down, make sure you keep good notes so that you don't have to do that all over again, because you're going to forget it, and then you're going to have to go find that resource over again. You're going to have to retranslate that resource again and all that stuff. And so basically, if I'm going to create a really good note, I only want to do it once. I want to have it in this project. I want to have it backed up to the cloud, and then I want to be able to have it here accessible for future translators that I'm working with. So let's say now in the future, I'm checking another team with Exodus, and instead of writing all of this out in a note, I can add them to the project, and I can say in the note, say they needed to treat this, stretch out my hand better in their translation. I can say, see my note. And all I have to do is click here, and they're going to read it. Now, for the meanwhile, if this were a translation that was already done, then I would put it here, and I would also paste it into a consultant note. So, I could go here, Control-Shift-N. Let me put down the mic here. Control-Shift-N, and then I could, paste this here, and then I could bold this, etc. if I need to format it, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so I'd have a record in both places and the conversation. So I hope that makes sense. And now let me talk about another really important thing that I think is paramount for really good best practices for consultants. And that's keeping track of culture and language questions and answers. Because if you're doing a project, obviously you're going to ask a lot of questions about the culture and the language and how it works. And as you go along learning these things, number one, you don't want to forget them and ask the same question again and frustrate them, because I forget a lot. And number two, if you for some reason can't keep going on that project and another consultant has to join you or take over, you want them to have quick access to glean all the stuff that you've learned over the years with that team and be able to get caught up to speed quickly without having to frustrate that team by asking all the same questions that you did, right? So how do I do that? I keep a Word doc for each language that I work with. So here's Chatino culture and language questions and answers. So I've got some power tool, kind of, like thank you, goodbye, God bless you, hello, just to chat with them on Skype, and use a little bit of their language. You could have more. And then I have questions like this, I have, do the Chatino people make covenants? And their answer. And then what's the process if you do make covenants or pacts? What do you do? What does that look like? And then we talked about speech reporting, orientador del habla. I was trying to get at what would this sound like, if we change this speech reporting. And then a lot of other things. So as you can see, we've got almost 3,000 words going on here, and some of these notes are in English, some of them are in Spanish, but it helps me keep track of all of these little idiosyncrasies that I'm learning about the language that I need to keep tabs on and be aware of, so that they don't have to write a long explanation every time I forget about it. Okay, so that's a Word document I highly recommend keeping well organized on. And this is always saved in my Google Drive. So I highly recommend keeping this backed up in the cloud as you work on it so that you don't lose it. Anyway, basic stuff. Now, what do I do to make consulting a little easier and to keep on track and more satisfying? There's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that I listened to a couple times recently. It's so helpful. One of the things he says is that you have to in order to keep a habit going strong, is you have to make it satisfying. That's one of the elements. And he recommends something called a habit tracker. And the habit tracker that I use is this little thing here. So there are these two cups, and you can put whatever you want in the cups. I just chose some beans because that's what we had on hand, some dry beans. I've got 30 beans in here right now. You could put whatever you want. So basically, it's really helpful to have something when you're doing tedious work that makes it a little more satisfying, tactile, visual, right? Just like a checklist. So every time I finish checking a verse, one bean comes out and it goes into the next. As you go, you get to see your progress. He gave an example in the book of a guy who would start each day with a glass jar full of paper clips. He had 120 paper clips, and every time he'd make a sales call, he moved one paper clip into another jar. And he would do that every day, and he became a millionaire, right? So, the moral of the story is, if you do this while you're consulting, you'll become a millionaire. So this is something I'm trying out. It's new, but it is cool because you could do all kinds of things with it. Say you count up all the verses in a book that you've got a deadline for or whatever. So you put that many marbles or that many beans in a jar, and then that way you can keep track of your progress visually as you go through that book with the verses. So that's a fun way. Or you could just say, okay, I want to do 80 verses per day, and that's my goal, and then you have a visual way to track it. Okay. That's the habit tracker. Now, let's move on to Express Scribe here. So let me go back. Let's first go to Ezra. Ezra 6, 4. That's where I left off. I've been working. So here we are, Ezra 6, 4. And one of the most helpful things, I think, for keeping focus, laser focus on a text, so you're looking at your back translation or whatever, for keeping laser focus on that, it's always better to have a second pair of eyes reading the source text or whatever to you. Now, since I don't have an assistant to do that, I have a digital assistant that does that for me. So what I've done is I've downloaded a Spanish version of the NIV, and you could do whatever version you want. You could use the Hebrew. There's a free version of the Hebrew as well. You can find that online of a guy reading in Hebrew. So you could use those MP3 files, Greek, whatever you prefer. I'm not that far along with Hebrew yet to be able to just listen to it and it be like as clear as day as it is in Spanish. So I use the Spanish NIV, and so I get that downloaded first. So here's my folder, right? Ezra in Spanish, each chapter. So I open up my Express Scribe transcription software that I told you about at the beginning. Here it is. So what I've done is I have dragged and dropped these files into this little window. And make sure you just do the non-commercial home use license. Don't try to get the paid for license or anything. There's not any limitations on this version that I've seen that would make it worth buying the other one. So just stick with that. Now this is great because why am I using a transcription software? Well, number one, because it has hotkeys that you can program. And number two, because you can change the speed very easily of the reader. So let me show you how I have the hotkeys set up. If you go to Tools, Options. We go to, I think if we go here, it doesn't matter, playback, whatever, you'll find the hotkeys tab. And you'll see here that I've programmed the down key, the arrow down key, to stop, and the up key to play, and then fast forward and rewind are pretty logical, left and right. Okay. So I have a super easy control right on my keyboard. I never have to look at this window again. I don't have to ever flip back and forth between windows. This is just running in the background. I have complete control just with my 4 arrow keys of what I'm hearing. So then I bring back ParaText, and now I can start listening to the reader, hitting the up arrow key.
Utensilios de oro y de plata que Nabucodonosor sacó del templo de Jerusalén y llevó a Babilonia, que los devuelvan a Jerusalén y que se pongan en el templo de Dios donde deben estar.
Okay, so I stop it with the down arrow key. Now, notice that the guy sounds drunk. Why is that? Well, it's because I have him reading at 52% playback. 52% playback speed. So I can adjust the speed here. And if I need to just rewind, I just hold down the left arrow key. And you'll hear that, and then I can play back. The other cool thing is that when I stop, so I can tweak the settings so that when I stop, it automatically, when it starts playing again, will back up a certain amount of milliseconds. So let's say I want it to back up like a whole second of audio from where I stopped it so that I keep overlapping and I don't have to be rewinding a lot. Well, I can set that. So this is so helpful because I've actually caught a lot of things that I wouldn't have caught if I was trying to jump with my eyes. You know, jumping back and forth is very precarious when you're checking for detail. This is why when I was at the Center for the Study of the Septuagint in Göttingen, Germany, there was a Italian guy who's a professional manuscript. What do you call those? What do you call those guys? I forgot. It's a professional manuscript guy. You know, that's all he spends his life doing is reading manuscripts, evaluating manuscripts, and also collating manuscripts. So he would have students from the university reading out the text. If they were collating manuscripts, he would have them read it out while he was focusing on what had been collated. And that's how they checked to make sure they had copied them perfectly. So I highly recommend using this. Now, obviously, it's not going to solve everything, right? You're going to have to stop a lot and recheck something, go back. But man, is it helpful when you're going through some big narrative sections that are easier? Or if you go, for instance, to Ezra 2, you do not want to be jumping back with this long genealogy. You do not want to be jumping back and forth, back and forth. You want someone to just read it out so you can make sure, okay, all the names are there, all the numbers are there. And so this helped me slog through this way faster than I would have been. And it's a lot less strain on your eyes. So yeah, I highly recommend using this tool as a complement to ParaText. So yeah, other than the basic things like the notes list and using this to work through lots of notes and keep track of everything, also always recommend using the parallel passages tool here to keep track of parallel passages, and also keep your team on the key biblical terms tool. If you don't know about the key biblical terms tool, definitely check that out on the ParaText tutorials. And it's, I think, something that's very neglected often with teams. And it helps tremendously with everyone's job. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and have a good one.